Marcus, you need to understand. My father's voice crackled through the phone. That familiar tone of disappointment I'd grown accustomed to over the years. Your brother has 3 kids now. He needs the space more than you do. I stood in my downtown office, looking out over the city skyline as I processed what my father was telling me. Our childhood home, the sprawling Victorian where I'd spent countless hours helping my grandfather restore every inch of woodwork, was being sold to my younger brother David for a fraction of its worth. My name is Marcus Bennett, and at 35, I'd learned that being the responsible son didn't count for much in my family's eyes. While David bounced between failed business ventures and relied on our parents' constant financial support, I'd built a successful investment firm from the ground up. But somehow David was still the one who needed help. The closing is next week, my mother chimed in on the other line. We're practically giving it to him, but you know how tight things are with the kids' private school tuition. Of course they were tight. David's latest venture, a chain of organic juice bars, had collapsed spectacularly 6 months ago, leaving our parents to cover the debt, just like they'd covered his failed restaurant, his short-lived tech startup, and his brief career as a professional poker player. I see, I said, keeping my voice neutral. And when were you planning to tell me about this? Oh honey, my mother sighed, we didn't want to bother you. You're always so busy with work, and you know how David struggles. I did know. I'd watched for years as my parents poured money and support into David's schemes, while my own achievements were met with polite disinterest. When I made partner at my first firm, they missed the celebration because David needed help moving into his new apartment. When I started my own company, they were too preoccupied with David's divorce to attend the opening. What they didn't know was that 6 months ago, when my grandfather's trust matured, I'd used it to quietly purchase the house through a separate LLC. Grandpa James had always seen through David's charm, recognized my dedication. Keep your cards close, kid, he'd told me before he passed. Sometimes the best hand is the one nobody knows you're holding. Marcus, my father's voice pulled me back to the present. You understand why we're doing this, right? Family has to help family. I thought about the trust paperwork safely stored in my office safe, about the look on David's face when he'd called last week, bragging about his amazing deal on the house. Of course, Dad, family helps family. After hanging up, I called my lawyer, Michael Torres. We'd been friends since college, and he'd helped me set up the trust purchase. They're trying to sell you your own house, he said, laughing when I explained the situation. Please tell me you're going to let this play out. The closing's next week. Think you can make it? Wouldn't miss it for the world. The next few days passed in a blur of texts and calls from family members. David sent photos of furniture he was planning to buy, talking about knocking down walls and modernizing the space. My mother called twice more to explain why David deserved this opportunity, how he was finally ready to be responsible. I let them talk, let them plan. Each message only confirmed what I'd known when I'd first set up the trust that they'd never change. The morning of the closing, I arrived early at the lawyer's office. Michael was already there, chatting with the real estate attorney my parents had hired, a nervous-looking man named Peterson. Mr. Bennett, Peterson greeted me. I wasn't expecting you today. Just here to support the family, I said, settling into a chair in the corner. David arrived next, dressed in an ill-fitting suit I recognized as one our parents had bought him for job interviews years ago. He barely acknowledged my presence, too busy showing Peterson pictures of his planned renovations. Our parents arrived last, Mom fussing with David's tie, Dad already reaching for his checkbook. The family tableau was so familiar it almost hurt, David the center of attention, our parents hovering proudly, me the quiet observer in the background. Shall we begin? Peterson asked, spreading out the paperwork. Now, regarding the sale of 1242 Maple Grove. Actually, Michael spoke up from his corner. There might be a small problem with that. The room went quiet. David looked up from his phone, frowning. What problem? Michael pulled out a folder, his expression professionally neutral. It seems the current owners haven't agreed to this sale. What are you talking about? My father demanded. We're the owners. We've owned this house for 40 years. Not exactly, Michael said, sliding a document across the table. The property was purchased 6 months ago by the Bennett Family Trust, LLC. Peterson grabbed the paper, his face growing pale as he read. This appears to be correct. The house was sold to a private trust in June. That's impossible, my mother said, her voice rising. We never sold anything. The sale was processed through the trust your father-in-law established, Michael explained calmly. The one that matured 6 months ago. All eyes turned to me. I met their stares steadily, years of quiet observation finally paying off. Marcus, my father's voice was barely a whisper. What did you do? Family helps family, right? I said, standing up. Grandpa James taught me that. He also taught me to protect what matters. David jumped up, his face red. You can't do this. Mom and Dad promised me that house. They can't promise what they don't own, I replied. The trust bought it fair and square. All the paperwork is in order. But I already told everyone. David sputtered. The kids are excited about their new rooms. Not my problem, I said, gathering my coat, though I hear there's a nice apartment complex near the juice bar location. You know, the one Mom and Dad had to bail you out of. The silence in the room was deafening. My mother had tears in her eyes. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. David just stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Mr. Peterson, I nodded to the attorney. I believe we're done here. Michael can provide you with all the relevant documentation. As I turned to leave, my father found his voice. Son, wait, we can figure this out. Maybe we can work something out with the trust. I paused at the door, thinking about all the family dinners I'd sat through listening to David's latest plans. All the times my own achievements had been overlooked. The trust isn't interested in selling, I said firmly. In fact, I'm planning some renovations of my own. Grandpa James always wanted to add a library in the East Wing. Walking out of that office, I felt lighter than I had in years. My phone was already buzzing with messages. Mom pleading, Dad demanding explanations. David alternating between threats and attempts at negotiation. I ignored them all and called the contractor I'd been working with. The renovations would start next week, returning the house to the vision Grandpa James and I had shared during those long afternoons working on it together. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making a scene or fighting back. Sometimes it's quietly building something they can't touch, then watching their plans crumble when they finally realize what they've lost. As I drove home that evening, I thought about Grandpa James's words. Keep your cards close, kid. He'd understood something my parents never had. That true family isn't about taking advantage of each other's goodwill. It's about building something worth protecting, something that lasts. The house would be that legacy now, restored and preserved the way it should have been all along. And if my family couldn't understand that, well, they had plenty of time to think about it from the outside looking in. The fallout from the closing was exactly what I'd expected, yet somehow still managed to surprise me. Within hours, my phone had logged over 50 missed calls and nearly 100 text messages. The family grapevine was burning up with activity, with relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly having very strong opinions about my betrayal. I sat in my study that evening, a glass of Grandpa James's favorite whiskey in hand, reading through the messages. My Aunt Caroline, always David's strongest supporter, had sent a particularly passionate series of texts. How dare you do this to your own brother? Your parents raised you better than this. David's children need that house. I took another sip of whiskey, remembering how this same aunt had convinced my parents to use my college fund to bail out David's first failed business venture. You can take loans, she'd said. David needs this chance now. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. Marcus, please. Your father is devastated. We never meant to hurt you. Can we please talk about this like adults? Adult conversations. That's what they always called it when they wanted me to give in to whatever David needed. Being adult meant understanding why David's needs always came first. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Through the security camera, I saw Michael standing outside, holding a bottle of champagne. Thought you might need some company, he said when I let him in. That was quite a show today. I led him to the study, where he settled into one of the leather armchairs. Peterson called me after you left, he continued, popping the champagne. Said he's never seen anything like it in 20 years of real estate law. How bad was it after I left? Michael grinned, pouring 2 glasses. Your brother tried to argue that the trust purchase was fraudulent. When that didn't work, he offered to buy it for double what your parents were asking. Then your father started threatening legal action until Peterson showed him the original trust documents with your grandfather's signature. And my mother alternated between crying and trying to explain how this was all a misunderstanding. He handed me a glass. You know they're not going to let this go easily, right? I nodded, thinking about the security system I'd had installed at the house last week. Already taken care of. Changed all the locks, updated the security codes, installed cameras. The contractor starts work on Monday. Speaking of which, Michael pulled out his phone. You might want to see this. He showed me a social media post from David's wife Sarah. It was a long rant about how I'd stolen their children's inheritance, and how they'd already sold their current house. The comments section was filled with supportive messages from family members, all expressing shock at my cruelty. They sold their house already? I asked, surprised. The closing was today. Michael shrugged. Your brother never was big on waiting for things to be official. Just then my phone lit up with a text from my father. We're coming over. This needs to be resolved tonight. I showed Michael the message. He raised an eyebrow. Want me to stay? Might be better if I handle this alone, I said, though I appreciated the offer. This has been coming for a long time. After Michael left, I didn't have to wait long. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later. Through the camera, I could see my parents and David standing there. David's face was red, and he was holding what looked like a stack of papers. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. It's late. Move aside, Marcus. David tried to push past me. We're settling this now. No, we're not, I said firmly. It's 9:30 p.m., and this is my home. If you want to talk, we can meet tomorrow at a neutral location. This is ridiculous. My mother burst out. We're your family. You can't just shut us out, like you shut me out of every major family decision for the past 20 years. The words came out before I could stop them. Years of quiet resentment finally finding voice. That's not fair, my father started, but I cut him off. Not fair. Let's talk about fair. Let's talk about how every time I achieved something, it was overshadowed by whatever crisis David had created. Let's talk about my college fund, or the trust fund Grandpa set up for both of us that somehow only David got to use. I needed that money for my businesses. David protested, and I needed parents who could be proud of me without comparing me to their perfect younger son. I shot back. Guess we both learned about disappointment. My mother started crying. Right on cue. How can you be so cruel? We only ever wanted what was best for both of you. No, I said quietly. You wanted what was best for David. I was just expected to understand and support whatever he needed. Well, now I need something. I need you all to leave. We're not leaving until you sign these. David thrust the papers forward. It's a contract agreeing to sell the house at market value. I actually laughed at that. Market value, like the bargain price you were going to pay. The house isn't for sale, David. Not now, not ever. You can't do this to my children. He shouted. Your children need a father who can stand on his own 2 feet, I interrupted. They need parents who understand the value of working for something instead of expecting it to be handed to them. They don't need a house that was never yours to give them. My father stepped forward, using his best negotiating voice. Son, let's be reasonable. We can work something out that benefits everyone. That's what I've been doing my whole life, Dad. Always being reasonable, always understanding, always stepping aside so David could have what he wanted. Not anymore. I started closing the door. The house is mine, legally and rightfully. Any further attempts to dispute this will go through my lawyers. Good night. You'll regret this, David called as I shut the door. The whole family will know what you did. I engaged the locks and walked back to my study, their voices still audible from outside. My phone started buzzing again. More relatives weighing in, more demands for explanations. I turned it off and poured another whiskey, raising the glass to the photo of Grandpa James on my desk. He was standing in front of the house, much younger then, with the same quiet smile I'd inherited. You were right, Grandpa, I said to the photo. Sometimes you have to protect what matters, even from family, especially from family. The next morning, I drove to the house early. The contractor's team was already there, unloading equipment. As I walked through the rooms, I could almost hear the echoes of my childhood. Grandpa teaching me about woodwork, the quiet afternoons spent reading in the window seat, the plans we'd made for each room. My phone buzzed a text from Michael. Your brother's wife is posting about legal action. Want me to handle it? I texted back. Yes, I send them the full trust documentation and a cease and desist letter. Copy in Mom and Dad. Standing in what would become the library, I felt a deep sense of peace. The house was safe now, preserved for the right reasons. Maybe someday my own children would learn woodworking here, would understand the value of building something lasting. But for now, it was enough to know that after years of giving way, I'd finally stood my ground. The renovation crews were starting their work, and with each passing day, the house would become more of what Grandpa James and I had dreamed of. Sometimes the strongest foundations are built on saying no to the wrong things. Even especially when those wrong things come from the people who should know better. 3 weeks after the closing debacle, the renovation of the Victorian was in full swing. I stood in what would become the library, watching as craftsmen carefully restored the original crown molding that David had planned to tear out. The morning sunlight streamed through the bay windows, illuminating dust motes and memories in equal measure. My phone buzzed, another email from the family lawyer. David and Sarah had attempted to challenge the trust purchase, claiming Grandpa James had been unduly influenced in his final years. The case was dismissed in preliminary hearings. The judge had been particularly unimpressed by David's history of financial mismanagement. Mr. Bennett, Jake, my head contractor, approached with a tablet. We found something interesting behind the wall in the master bedroom. Following him upstairs, I saw that his crew had exposed a hidden compartment during the demolition. Inside was a small wooden box with my name carved into the lid. Your grandfather's handwriting, Jake asked as I carefully lifted it out. I nodded, recognizing the precise lettering. Inside were photographs I'd never seen before, showing Grandpa James and me working on the house over the years. Below them was a letter dated just weeks before his passing. Marcus, if you're reading this, you've finally taken ownership of the house, just as we planned. I know it won't be easy. Your parents mean well, but they've always had a blind spot when it comes to David. Don't let their disappointment dim your resolve. This house isn't just wood and stone. It's a testament to patience, to doing things right even when no one else understands why. You were the only one who saw that, who spent the time learning its history and heart. I've left you the means to protect it. Use them wisely. Love, Grandpa James. I carefully folded the letter, thinking about how he'd known exactly how this would play out, known I'd need this reminder of why I'd taken this stand. My phone rang, my mother's number. After 3 weeks of unanswered calls, I decided it was time. Hello, Mom. Marcus. Her voice was tight, controlled. Your father's had a heart scare. My breath caught. He's fine. Minor angina. The doctor says it's stress-related. The accusation in her tone was clear. I'm sorry to hear that, I said carefully. Would you like me to visit? What I'd like is my son back, she snapped. This vendetta against your brother has gone far enough. He and Sarah had to move in with us because their house sale can't be reversed. Of course they had. David always landed on his feet. Or rather, landed on our parents. That's unfortunate, I replied. But it's not my responsibility to fix David's poor planning. He's your brother. Yes, and I'm your son. But that never seemed to matter much when it was my dreams getting sacrificed for his. Silence on the line. Then, softer, we never meant to hurt you, Marcus. I know, Mom. That's what makes it worse. You never even realized you were doing it. Looking around the half-finished room, I thought about all the future moments this house would hold. The renovation's going well, I offered. We found some old photos Grandpa James left. Your grandfather, she said bitterly, always did play favorites. No, Mom. He just recognized effort. He saw who actually cared about this place, who spent weekends learning its history instead of demanding it as a birthright. Another pause. David's children will have whatever home their parents earned for them. I cut in. Just like I did. After we hung up, I walked through the house, checking on the various projects underway. The original hardwood floors were being restored in the dining room. The kitchen was getting updated while preserving its vintage charm. Each room was a balance of past and future, just as Grandpa James and I had envisioned. My phone chimed with a text from Sarah. The kids cry every night about their promised rooms. I hope you're happy with yourself. I thought about responding. about pointing out that she and David had promised something that was never theirs to give. Instead, I tucked the phone away and focused on the work being done. That evening, as the crews packed up, Jake handed me their progress report. "We're ahead of schedule," he said, "though there's been some interest in our work." "Interest? Your brother's been driving by. Sometimes parks across the street. Want me to call security?" I shook my head. "Just make sure everything's locked up tight each night." After Jake left, I sat on the front porch swing, newly restored to its original condition, and watched the sunset paint the neighborhood in amber hues. A car drove by slowly. David's, but didn't stop. Let him look. Let him see what care and dedication could create. Maybe, finally he'd learn something. My phone lit up with a message from Michael. Family court records sealed. Sarah's social media posts taken down. Cease and desist holding firm. Good. The legal walls were as solid as the physical ones. As darkness fell, I locked up the house, pausing in each room to appreciate the progress. The library's shelves were taking shape, ready to hold the books Grandpa James had left me. The window seats were being rebuilt to match his original designs. This wasn't just a renovation anymore. It was a restoration of the house. Yes, but also of boundaries long ignored, of respect too long denied. In the master bedroom, I placed Grandpa's letter and photos in the wall safe I'd had installed. Future proof of past wisdom, protected just like the house itself. Sometimes the hardest part of standing your ground isn't the initial confrontation. It's maintaining your position through the aftermath, through the guilt trips and accusations, through the rewriting of history that family so often attempts. But as I drove home that night, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice. The house would stand as Grandpa James had intended, a testament to doing things right, to valuing what truly matters, to understanding that some legacies are earned, not given. And if my family couldn't understand that, well, that was their loss to bear, not mine to fix. 6 months later, I stood in the completed library, running my hand along the perfectly restored mahogany shelves. The morning light filtered through the restored stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows across Grandpa James's leather-bound book collection. The house transformation was finally complete. The doorbell rang. Michael had arrived for the private house tour. He whistled as he stepped into the foyer, taking in the restored grand staircase and crystal chandelier. "This is incredible, Marcus. Your grandfather would have loved this." "He already did," I smiled. "Everything here was in his original plans. We just brought it back to life." As we walked through the house, I shared how each room had been restored to its former glory, while incorporating modern amenities. The kitchen maintained its vintage charm, with updated appliances hidden behind period-appropriate panels. The master suite's bathroom featured original tile work we'd salvaged and restored. "Have you heard from them?" Michael asked as we reached the sunroom. I nodded. "David and Sarah bought a small house across town. Mom sends weekly updates about how cramped they are, how the kids miss their rooms here. Still playing that card, huh? Old habits die hard." I gazed out at the restored garden. "Dad's health has improved. Turns out his stress decreased once David moved out of their house." Michael laughed. "Funny how that works." We settled into the library, my favorite room. The space Grandpa James and I had spent countless hours planning was now reality. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a rolling ladder, comfortable leather chairs, and a hidden door that led to a small study. "I got an interesting call yesterday," I said, pouring 2 glasses of Grandpa's favorite whiskey. "The Historical Society wants to feature the house in their annual tour. Apparently it's now the best preserved Victorian in the county. Are you going to do it?" I nodded. Grandpa would have loved that. He always said this house deserved to be appreciated by people who understood its value. Just then my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Your Aunt Caroline's 60th birthday party is next month. The whole family will be there. Please come." Michael read the message over my shoulder. "Going to go?" I thought about it, looking around at what I'd built, what I'd protected. "Yes," I said finally. "It's time. They need to see that standing your ground doesn't mean losing your family. It means redefining the relationship on healthier terms." Plus Michael grinned. "Your brother can't try to claim the house anymore. The renovation photos have been featured in 3 magazines." I laughed, raising my glass. "To Grandpa James. He taught me that sometimes the best inheritance isn't what you're given, it's what you choose to protect. As the sun set that evening, after Michael left, I sat in Grandpa's old chair in the library. The house felt alive with memories, both old and new. On the wall hung a photo of Grandpa and me on this very porch, tools in hand, smiling at the camera. Below it, I'd framed his letter from the wall, its wisdom now a daily reminder. This house isn't just wood and stone. It's a testament to patience, to doing things right even when no one else understands why. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from David. The house looks good. You did what I never could. Take care of it. Maybe that was as close to understanding as we'd ever get. And maybe that was enough. Because in the end, this was never about winning or losing. It was about honoring a legacy. About proving that some things are worth fighting for, worth protecting. About showing that true family strength comes not from giving in, but from standing firm in what you believe. The house would stand as testament to that truth. Its restored glory a reminder that sometimes the most important victories are the quiet ones. One not in dramatic confrontations, but in the patient, persistent defense of what matters most. I raised my glass one final time to Grandpa's photo. In the end, he'd given me far more than a house. He'd given me the courage to protect it, the wisdom to restore it, and the strength to make it mine. Some inheritances, after all, are meant to be earned.